channel. Today we are going to be getting very close to the end of this series on our channel where we cover which stats matter for positions in Madden, and today we are going to be going over cornerbacks and which stats matter most for the cornerback position and which stats you guys can overlook and kind of disregard. Today, to be quite honest with you, cornerbacks are maybe one of the more straightforward positions in the game, but there are a few stats that are, in my opinion, the most important stats for the cornerback position. They should jump out to you guys whenever you guys actually take a look at the position and compare the top guys like Stephon Gilmore, Jalen Ramsey, and even Jair Alexander, guys like that, and Tre'Davious White as well. When you compare those guys to the guys below them, there are some stats that jump out that make them better than everybody else. And yes, obviously, we're going to be talking a little bit about their, coverage stats, their man coverage, their zone coverage, their press ability. Those things clearly make a difference for cornerbacks. And I apologize, I clicked into the wrong thing. Those things clearly make a difference for cornerbacks in Madden and Madden 21, Madden 20, previous Maddens as well. But there are four stats that I think are the most important. So let's go ahead and jump into a franchise where we can actually take a look at a player card and show you guys the important stats for these players. So let's go ahead and look at the overall roster. And we're going to be looking heavily at a guy like a Jalen Ramsey or a Tre'Davious White, or even we could talk a little bit about Stephon Gilmore, some of the top cornerbacks in the game. So whenever we take a look at these players, everybody's obviously going to want their speed to be the top stat. And yes, that matters because that's going to determine how well a player is going to be able to keep up with the wide receiver that they're covering. And so yes, speed and acceleration, those are two of the four stats that I'm going to talk about as the most important stats for a cornerback. Speed and acceleration are way up there at the top of the list. And like I said, this is a very straightforward position. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Having a faster quarterback, having a cornerback that can accelerate faster is very advantageous at that position. Now, like I say in all my videos, that depends on what you're going to do with your corners. This can vary depending on an outside corner versus a slot corner and things like that, what you're trying to do with them, a man corner versus a zone corner, but regardless, your speed and acceleration is going to help you. Acceleration especially because it's going to determine how quickly they can break on the ball once it's thrown in the air. That's incredibly important. But the other two stats that we have to focus on that I feel like a lot of people shift to the side with a cornerback that people don't necessarily think are the most important stats would be their agility and their change of direction. Change of direction being added in this year and kind of being added into kind of nerf user linebackers and things like that. Change of direction and agility go hand in hand in determining how well a cornerback can change direction and how well a cornerback can break towards the ball and can break on a route that a receiver is running. Agility and change of direction are maybe even more important than speed and acceleration for a defensive back. If you have a defensive back that has great coverage skills, great speed, but they don't have that agility and they don't have that change of direction, they don't have the ability to move and change their body the way that it's going and contort their body and make a play on the ball, it's not going to matter. Straight line speed does a lot for you, but at the end of the day, as a defensive back, you are the position that has to change the way your body is moving more than any other position in the game, because you're starting off in a back pedal, you're switching to potentially a straight line run. You're contorting your body in ways that no other position has to contort their body, and it affects Madden just the same as it does in real life. Your agility and your change of direction are incredibly important for this position, and I can't overstate it enough how much those are the most important stats for a defensive back. I would personally rank it as number 1, agility, number 2, change of direction, number 3, acceleration, and number 4, speed. Those are by far the most important stats for your defensive backs, and that's why you'll see a lot of guys out there with athletic defensive backs that don't necessarily have the best coverage skills, because that athleticism is what makes the difference between getting an interception or a receiver getting a ball. That athleticism is the difference between a split-second reaction and the receiver going downfield for extra yardage. That athleticism is the most important thing for a defensive back. Now, we can talk about man coverage, zone coverage, press coverage. Those things affect how they actually perform in coverage, but again, those things have to be backed up by their physical attributes. Or, I could have a 99 man coverage corner that's sticking with a wide receiver all day long, but if they're not able to turn around and break towards the ball when it's thrown that way, yeah, they kept up with them, but were they able to make the play? No. They have to be able to make that play once the ball arrives or once the ball is thrown, and that is the important key to understanding the ratings for defensive backs, especially cornerbacks in Madden, especially Madden 21 now that they've added in change of direction. Talking about previous Maddens, agility, #1 stat for defensive backs. I've preached this all along. One of the best hidden gem cornerbacks in the game is Grant Haley. Grant Haley as a corner has like 97 agility or something like that. Incredible. Plays like one of the best cornerbacks in the game, and he's only a 71 overall, and it's because he is so agile that he is always able to change his body or contort his body or change direction to be able to make a play, regardless of whether he's sticking with the man, at a superhuman rate like some of these corners would be able to. Outside of that, they're jumping. That's going to depend. That's going to influence how well they're able to go up at high point catches, knock the ball out, and things like that. That matters quite a bit. That kind of is grouped in with their athleticism. And then outside of that, their catching is pretty important because there are a lot of good corners, like you guys can see with Jair Alexander here with 68 catching, that might drop the ball on a consistent basis whenever it's actually thrown their way. There are a lot of good corners that actually have pretty bad catching and end up not being able to bring the ball in the way that you might want them to. You could look at a guy like Xavier Howard that in this roster has 82 catching. That's the type of cornerback that you want if you want them to generate turnovers. Now, the thing with that is a lot of these cornerbacks that have good catching and good, actual skills like man coverage, zone coverage, press coverage, their trade-off is that they might not be as athletic. You might look at a guy like a Richard Sherman that has all the coverage ability in the world, but his body at this point in time is starting to let him down a little bit. He's a little bit slower, a little bit less athletic, and therefore, yes, he might stick with a receiver, but he might not be able to change direction and break on the ball and make the same type of plays that a more athletic corner would that doesn't necessarily have the same coverage stats. So that's important to note with defensive backs, on top of their agility, their change of direction and things like that, their catching ability is going to affect if they're actually able to make plays on the ball, and that's incredibly important. Now, outside of that, you can take a look at some of their slot cornerback traits, as you guys might call them, things like tackling, block shedding, hit power. Those things will affect you more if you expect your cornerbacks to be making those types of plays, but generally speaking, with the way that I run my defense personally, I don't expect my cornerbacks to be out there making plays, making tackles, helping out in the box and things like that, because I trust my front seven to do that, and even more so, I trust my safeties to come up and help. My defensive backs are pretty much purely coverage players, and so I tend to disregard the block shedding, the hit power, the tackling, because those don't have as much effect on the way that I run my defense. If you want your cornerbacks to be able to be more effective at the line of scrimmage and not get blocked downfield and prevent outside runs and things like that, block shedding is probably the key attribute that you guys are going to want to look at, because that's going to force running backs back inside if they can get off their block and prevent the running back from getting to the edge. That's pretty important. Outside of that, you're going to be looking at your stamina number. These guys, like wide receivers, are running all day long. They're going up the field, down the field, left, right, all over the place. These guys, it matters so much for you guys to have good stamina with your defensive backs, and like some of those older corners that I talked about, maybe a Richard Sherman, for example, their stamina numbers are starting to let them down at that age. Other older cornerbacks, some of the slower cornerbacks in the game, some of these guys don't necessarily have the best stamina ratings, and it lets you down because on a crucial third or fourth down, they might be off the field deep into a drive because their stamina number is lower than you might want it to be. You're looking at 95 plus stamina for corners if you want them to be on the field consistently and to be able to keep up with the wide receivers that are out there. With that being said, there's really not much else to do with cornerbacks. You know, there's not much else to focus on. Those are the key attributes. That's what's most important. Like I said, in order to rank them from most important to least important, agility is at the top. It is the most important stat. You might consider acceleration second. You might consider change of direction second. But number one for defensive backs to be able to do their job, to be able to break on the ball and be able to make plays, agility is number one. Agility is king. With that being said, hopefully this information helps you guys out. I'll see you guys in the next video. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. Have a happy holiday. Good night.